Well, joining me to debate this is Raphi Bloom, member of the management board at the Jewish Representative Council of Greater Manchester and Region. Raphi, some will say, you know, that it's Border Force's job to be tough and make sure that people coming in do so with good reason.
And I would agree with that. But in this instance, look, let's put it this way. The UK has, as you've said, historically strong military security and trade ties with Israel. There's visa-free travel between the two countries. There should have been absolutely no reason for these two young men to have been stopped. Their passports should have been stamped and they should have been let through without any question. It was only when they were asked why they were here and they started to explain that they were survivors of the Nova Music Festival massacre. Actually, they're heroes. They saved dozens of people themselves. Yeah. And it was only when they explained that to the border officer that things began to go downhill. And there's absolutely nothing that should have meant they were detained for 2 hours. And that disgraceful comment at the end is absolutely beyond the pale. So I think it was done because they were Israelis, because they were Jews, and it's shocking.
I think your point actually is worth expanding, that when those paragliders came indiscriminately, massacring and injuring people, those two lads could have done a runner. Those two lads, couldn't they have gone for safety, but in fact they stayed, helped people, gave medical aid. You're absolutely right. They did play an heroic role, something perhaps that we ought to emphasise a little bit more. Raphi, in the wake of October the 7th, there has been, I put it to you, a very significant shift in British foreign policy, in the attitudes of many of our public administrations, and I include much of the education system in this. And I don't know what you think, but I just feel there's a younger generation who just don't have much sympathy for Israel.
I think you're right. And I think I would even add something further to that, because this incident came not 1 week after a visibly Jewish young patient at the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital was treated in the most appalling manner by nurses who were wearing pro-Palestinian badges and paraphernalia, forced to be removed from his cubicle, have his cannula inserted on the floor. And this is a systematic problem that we're seeing on university campuses, that we're seeing in schools, primary schools, high schools, that we're seeing up and down the country. And it needs to be called out and it needs to be stopped, because it's already a distressing time to be a Jew in this country since October the 7th. We've seen a 4,000% rise in anti-Semitic incidents. Quite a few of them, by the way, came in the immediate few days after October the 7th, before Israel had even retaliated. These were anti-Semitic incidences by people celebrating the murders and the massacre of October the 7th. So you're absolutely right. There needs to be action taken to stop certainly government employees and civil servants from prejudice against Jews because of their disagreement with Israel's actions, Israel's rightful actions in Gaza.
Yeah, I made the point earlier that it wasn't just Border Force, that this runs deep right through all of our public services. I talked about education, you talked about an incident that took place in a hospital, but the ultimate one is the police. And it seems that on our streets, some of the most appalling things get chanted. From the river to the sea gets put up, on the Elizabeth Tower beneath Big Ben. Not a single arrest gets made. Mayor Khan of London doesn't say a word of criticism about it. And yet when a bloke stands up with a Hamas are terrorists poster, he's manhandled to the ground by 5 policemen. Isn't it on the streets, Raphi, where this needs to begin? Isn't it the attitude to policing that above all needs to change?
I think the problem, you're absolutely right. And I think the problem is that there's been no clarity with regards to what the law is and what the police can and can't do. And different police forces have got different views on some of these obnoxious anti-Semitic signs that we're seeing. I saw one in Manchester last week that said that Netanyahu is the Hitler of Gaza. Now, that's a clearly anti-Semitic sign, but no action was taken. Now, in Manchester, we do have a very, very good relationship with Greater Manchester Police. They have been outstanding in terms of the way that they've policed the community, secured the community, made us feel safe. But I think the problem is that there is inconsistency amongst police forces, and that is a big problem that we have and is allowing a lot of this Jew hate on the street. I think there's also a misunderstanding sometimes of some of the chants that are being made. For example, Chai B'Chai B'Al Yehud, which is an ancient Muslim battle cry to murder Jews, calls for jihad and intifada. We know what the meaning of these are. These are calls for the murder of Jews. And I think there needs to be a consistent approach taken by police forces across the country, because these marches are making our city centres no-go areas for Jews every weekend.
Final thought, Raphi Bloom, if I may. How pessimistic are you looking ahead?
We're proud British Jews. I'm a proud British Jew. I'm a proud Mancunian. Our community has made this city, the city of Manchester that I live in, the great city that it is. We're not going anywhere. We're not going to be pushed out by people who are anti-Semitic and prejudiced against us. But I think it's important to say that anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine. It's always the first thing. It starts with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. And I think it's incumbent on everybody in this country to stand up to this Jew hatred that we witness on our streets every weekend, that we're seeing in our institutions, and saying enough is enough.